Hello everyone, I'm very happy to be here with you today. Today we're going to have a discussion with Florence about the major challenges of AI in industry and manufacturing. I'm Alexandre Thion, managing partner at Artefact, and I lead our industrial activities at Artefact. We support our clients in their transformation through data and AI.
Hello Alexandre, I'm Florence Bénézit, partner at Artefact, specialist in industrial data and AI governance. I'm also delighted to be with you today for this fascinating topic. Alexandre, could you tell us what major challenges you see in the industry today?
First, let me lay out the playing field a bit as a starting point for our discussion. First of all, when we look at the industrial landscape in France, Europe, or internationally, we see a great deal of diversity among the major industrial players. We have an economic fabric made up of many very small businesses, or rather SMEs, with strong specializations, but also global companies with factories and production sites all over the world. Across the globe, which means there are very different levels of maturity, sizes, and progress in the transformation to Industry 4.0. So we obviously see very diverse players, but they all face a number of common challenges. In recent years, energy costs have risen sharply, as have the costs of raw materials, which has had a significant impact on global supply chains, leading to major operational difficulties. As a result, these players must transform themselves in a context where they are increasingly expected to adopt sustainable practices and where there is a strong challenge in acquiring resources and skills that are scarce on the market. So, we are indeed facing a necessary transformation, but the economic playing field is currently full of uncertainties.
Yes, absolutely. We see this in the industry, especially the shortage of talent. We're talking about AI and data. Today, talent expects factories to be modern. With modern screens, modern data, they don't always have that, so there's a real need to modernize factories. There's another challenge in modernizing factories, which is their ability to produce customized products. The market is increasingly demanding products with very precise and personalized specifications, and that requires industrial processes that aren't too standardized, with the ability to adapt those processes. And behind all of that, it's also about data. So we can clearly see that the industry is facing major challenges. Can AI offer an opportunity to solve these challenges?
Absolutely. When we talk about AI, we first need to set the playing field. There's AI for highly analytical uses to better manage operations. We're going to use AI to better predict demand and therefore align and adapt the supply chain. We'll use AI in everyday operations. We'll improve safety at production sites thanks to AI, whether through imaging or risk analysis. We'll obviously use AI for a go-to-market approach that is much more targeted and effective. And so AI is truly found throughout the entire industrial value chain, at the very core of the business, but also in support functions to be more efficient in areas like marketing, including business to business, or in legal or human resources functions. So the playing field for AI in industry is obviously very broad, with a unique aspect today. There are a number of use cases that are now well known, such as optimizing energy consumption. This is a need and a topic that has already been addressed on a large scale by many players. But what we are seeing today, much newer topics, particularly those related to generative AI, which opens up a world of possibilities, including for highly specialized and entirely new use cases. For example, we can enhance the B2B go-to-market by speeding up the response time for commercial proposals. We can improve the ability to manage risk or risks in the factory by enhancing risk assessment at a workstation. So the field of generative AI or generative AI itself has greatly expanded the range of possibilities for AI in industry.
Yes, and generative AI is much more flexible than what we used to call machine learning, which was much more rigid and structured. And we can clearly see that this will also allow us to reinvent the way we interact with machines tomorrow and the way we interact with knowledge. So for example, you mentioned safety in factories. Tomorrow we can imagine that when someone starts their shift, they'll be able to ask a bot about best safety practices for their workstation. We also talked earlier about the need for product customization. We can imagine that in the future, generative AI will speed up the design of new products and also make it easier to configure machines to handle new specifications and more quickly create the machine calibration for the new product.
So we can clearly see the opportunities, but what are the main concrete challenges you see today that are holding companies back from adopting AI?
Very clearly, it's the data. First of all, we were talking about product specifications. Today, companies have a lot of configurators. Often product data is difficult to access. That's exactly why many companies are currently working on their PLM, which is the product lifecycle management tool. But that's not all. There are also all the factory data, which are difficult to capture. These are real-time data that are sometimes a bit obscure, and it requires large-scale data collection programs. These programs are not so simple, not only because of the volume of data and the lack of standardization of this data from one factory to another, but there are also major security issues with this data, though I think we'll talk about that a bit more. Alexandre, could you give us some very concrete examples of what AI can do for the industry?
Examples we have today in production, meaning these AI solutions are actually working in the real life of companies. There are two that are quite significant. The first is predictive maintenance. Today, being able to better anticipate the life cycle of a machine and therefore potentially its maintenance needs to prevent breakdowns. Currently, the models work extremely well, and we are seeing gains in maintenance costs and downtime of around 30%. So these are very significant gains in predictive maintenance. Another example that works very well today is the deployment of AI agents, IT agents, on operational workflows. So we take a business process, usually with many sequential tasks, multiple data sources, numerous interfaces, and then we drastically streamline the end-to-end process by introducing automation and AI, and an experience for the operator, technician, or user that is of much higher quality. So by streamlining, automating, and adding AI, we can reduce highly operational workflows by about 70 to 75%. So today, there are real use cases in production that can transform a large or small part of a process with a very measurable impact.
Yes, absolutely. And this actually raises governance issues. Generative AI, which makes it possible to create these automation agents, they can make mistakes. An industry is a sector with a zero-risk culture, so the fact that an AI can make mistakes can be unsettling. And so AI governance is useful to properly balance the value, which is very significant. A 60% productivity gain is huge on certain processes. We will have to balance these productivity gains with taking on some risk, a machine that can make mistakes, and therefore implement new processes to catch those errors. There's also another risk, which I briefly mentioned earlier, and that's cybersecurity. We can't afford to introduce risks to the machines in the factory. There are men behind these machines, there are women behind these machines, so we need the highest level of safety. That's why data collection only happens in one direction. And any incoming information goes through very strong security safeguards. So this zero-risk culture in the industry explains why, on the shop floor in factories, we still see very little use of generative AI. There is a bit, particularly in safety, but we don't see any that significantly impact the actual production process today, at least in France and Europe. However, just because there's some understandable reluctance to deeply dive into the very heart of the machine, that is to say, the actual factory, doesn't necessarily mean that we aren't currently seeing a truly great deal of excitement and extensive exploration of innovative generative AI use cases in numerous other vital business functions, such as essential support functions or dedicated customer support. Alexandre, could you give us an example of what an industrial company has been able to do for support functions with generative AI?
Yes, absolutely. There's often a challenge in the industrial and manufacturing world, which is the complexity of the products being sold. We're talking about catalogs with thousands or even tens of thousands of items with complex technical data that's hard to formalize and hard to collect. And so customer support is by nature complex. And generative AI can help because it can synthesize and provide structured, summarized data across an entire product catalog, for example. As a result, we see response times to technical questions and callback rates significantly reduced by equipping a call center or customer service with generative solutions already in place.
So if I understand correctly, the customer has a bot that explains which products are in the catalog or how to use them.
Yes, exactly. We're moving from a situation where we had to do a bit of archaeology in numerous and heterogeneous documentation databases to a situation where, with a simple interface, a customer service operator can query and ask about all the references, histories, versions on questions that are sometimes very commercial or very technical, and all of this in an extremely simple way. So typically, we move from a situation where the customer service operator had to look for information in a multitude of databases, often with quite heterogeneous formats, to a situation where the operator now has just one screen where they can query and ask any question, whether commercial or technical, and have access to synthetic and consistent summaries of all the necessary information. This is a typical case of transforming a customer service team while keeping in mind that even if generative AI works well, it's not magic either. In contexts where we rely on complex data, equipment data, technical data, there is often the challenge of data quality improvement and enrichment precisely to enable generative AI solutions afterwards. And the good news is that generative AI can also help upstream to improve the quality of data. We will enrich, we will harmonize reference data, we will improve the quality of data to then enable customer service and solutions for answering customer questions. So the range of possibilities is vast, and clearly today we are at the heart of this transformation, with many use cases now emerging.
So if I understand correctly, if, for example, I have a company with several countries, and each country has its own product catalog in its own language with perhaps a slightly different product organization, AI can standardize my product taxonomy and maybe match products to create a single documentation?
Exactly. So here we're really talking about AI for data foundations. We're really talking about AI for data foundations, but these are use cases that work well to speed up the process of ensuring data quality and making quality data available. So we can clearly see that data quality is crucial for making AI solutions work. What other needs or additional constraints do you see that should be taken into account?
So there's the thoughtful collection of this data. And it's not enough to just hope that it's of good quality, you have to make sure of it. And making sure means being able to define what data quality actually means so you can measure that quality. And that will require, and already requires today, a highly collaborative effort between technical teams who will technically implement the data quality controls, business teams, to define what quality means and what the minimum quality level is, to operate AI with minimal risk, but also data teams to store and improve data quality, possibly with AI when the need arises. So that's the first topic. The second topic is that we need to organize things. We need to organize all this data, not just product data, but also process data, how processes are structured, data from factories, work orders, demand and supply. We can see that there's a lot of information to orchestrate in order to make reliable purchases. And by the way, there's a lot of talk about data quality, but that's something the upcoming study on the future of AI supervision will cover in quite a bit of detail. We're going to have the same issue with data quality, but this time concerning the quality of agents. What is a quality agent? Again, it's up to the business side to define this, the technical teams to implement it, and the AI teams, not just the data teams, to ensure that agents are of better quality in the future. So it's the same story repeating itself, and obviously there won't be quality agents without quality data, since in fact we're already seeing this in the first generative AI use cases in industry. The main problem isn't so much the feared issue of hallucinations. Most of the time, when there's a problem with an agent, it's because it found incorrect information in a SharePoint, in documentation, or in a database, and the agent didn't have the necessary business expertise. And therefore, the critical perspective on that data, which is necessary to take a step back from this false information and correct it independently, is missing. So maybe we'll need to teach AI to critique the data, but the best, simplest, and most reliable solution is to correct it at the source. So data quality is a prerequisite for the quality of agents, and just as there is a challenge in monitoring data quality, there will soon be a challenge in monitoring the quality of agents. And that's going to be quite an adventure in the coming years.
Thank you for this discussion, Florence.
Thank you, Alexandre.
And I hope it was full of valuable insights.